when I was on OBS, I used to have to do 3 things to go live. So I'd have to have the information set up onto Facebook and then click the go live thing on there. And then I have to go back to Facebook to watch whether it had gone live yet.
Mm-hmm. And you couldn't run that on YouTube at the same time when you did the OBS?
No, I couldn't do YouTube with OBS. Now I have an announcement by Dave. All right. We should be proud here in Niagara. All right. Vivian Thomas won the District 86 Toastmasters speech competition. The next step is the Phases of the World Championship. And she's actually from Honeymoon City Toastmasters here in Niagara Falls.
Oh,
so there we go. So this is a first time we've had somebody win the District 86 Toastmasters speech contest from this area, from, when I say this area, in Toastmasters parlance. Well, no, in Toastmasters parlance, they have areas, right? And the area, there are 2 areas in Niagara, one of which is in Niagara and Welland, and the other which is St. Catharines and the rest of Niagara, right?
Oh, it's Garden City and Honeymoon.
Yeah, Garden City Toastmasters are in one, Honeymoon City Toastmasters in a different area. But Vivian Thomas is a fantastic speaker. I interviewed her when she last won when she last did very well. She won the Division L, and she was going to the District 86 at the time when COVID hit.
Wow.
So that was the speech contest that was abandoned, and she was on her way to success then, right? And let's hope she's on her way to success today, right?
Good. I'm glad to see that this is going up again. Good.
Yeah, all best wishes to Vivian Thomas. Okay, so we're talking today about quite a serious topic. Okay, let's get the informalities out the way first. Good morning, Mike.
Okay. Good morning, Mike.
and
anybody else who's out there who just chooses not to comment, good morning.
Yeah, absolutely. So welcome to Talking Niagara on Friday, 19th of April with me, Peter Giblett, and her, Angela Browne. Today's topic is homelessness. There's been a significant increase in homelessness in this area in Niagara, but this problem, while the problem hurts most at the municipal level, it also has an impact at provincial and federal level, because in part those levels of government all need to get together in order to provide the right solutions. And I think that's generally what most commentators would agree upon out there that I've seen upon the last little while. And we're going to be looking at some of that and some of the issues surrounding homelessness. So let's start this at how homeless impacts the municipality, which must understand poverty levels and provide mental health supports.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think that's an important aspect, because when you think about it, the homeless person you just saw last night as you were walking down the street, we notice them because they are in our backyard, so to speak. Well, I hope they're not literally in your backyard, but
they're very visible.
Yeah, but they're very visible.
Very visible.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this is where we notice it, and of course, because we notice them, this is why we say, "Oh my God, the city is going downhill." Right?
Yeah.
Or you would think that the city's
Mike is of the viewpoint there is not one government person that states that real estate is overpriced. We will never, and unless you do that, you'll never tackle the issue. Right? In part, we will come across some of that because poverty is real part and parcel of this, and that must be tackled.
It's very much a major, probably the most major part of it. Hey, like there are some other factors that are involved, but poverty is probably the major factor of it. And real estate prices and housing shortages and that sort of thing doesn't help.
Yeah, we've heard many stories about people who go to work, and they take their home to work with them. So they drive the car to work, they park in the
Mhm.
far corner of the lot, do their days worth of work. Somehow they figure out a way to go get free showers, and get in there to go to work. And when their shift is over, they move their home away from the work car park,
Yeah.
right? And that, at one time I'd say that was a story that was heard on TV, that I didn't think was true. But no, that is definitely, that's definitely true. And the fact that tourism, it being our biggest employer in this area in the Niagara region, is traditionally known for low pay wages, isn't helping the situation,
hmm
right?
And the interesting thing is when I talked to one guy one time when I just didn't even know how he does it. He seemed to be so clean all the time, but he was homeless. He says, "Well, what you do?" He says, "You join a gym, okay? Then you go drive in your car, get in the morning, go to the gym, go work out, use a shower, clean up." He had all of these practical ideas about how he
So
looked
use
after himself.
go to the gym for 10 minutes,
Yep,
work out for 10 minutes, take a half-hour shower, and then spend, then put a new set of clothing on.
yep, yep. And there's places that'll give you clothing for either low cost or for free in some instances.
Yeah, in Niagara Falls, I've seen there are places you can get clothing, yeah, low cost. You can go into Goodwill, and what do you call it, Value Village.
Yeah.
Both provide low cost clothing, but
And
how you
Start
get the
Me Up
clothing, what I
Niagara.
don't know.
Yeah, the Start Me Up Niagara here in St. Catharines is connected to a program where people can go in
Yeah,
and help select clothing for themselves, what they need. And there's other programs for women who find themselves in a situation, they can get that. And they
yeah.
do this.
So it's easy to see that in any municipality, doesn't matter where you are these days, there were probably a time when homelessness probably always existed in Niagara Falls, because that Niagara Falls would have the problem of tourism homelessness. People who are homeless in Toronto, who've been harassed by the police for months, get on a bus and head to some tourist
Yeah.
village, and spend the summer months in that tourist village, and then don't go home afterwards, right?
Mhm.
So that tourism homelessness has been an issue that Niagara Falls has, that many other, like St. Catharines probably doesn't,
Mhm.
right? Um, and generally speaking, though, any municipality of a reasonable size, you're going to see homelessness where you might not have done in St. Catharines, you might not have done 20, 30 years ago, when it was at the peak of its industrial power. But you do today, because we've got a lot of poverty, and we've got a major mental health crisis.
Yeah, I
Mm.
think when we have to talk about that, about the complicated situation where there's too many people who say, "Oh, well, let's just get them all mental health treatment. Let's just get up the
Yeah.
addictions, all that stuff." That sort of thing, yes, I think when I spoke to a number of people in St. Catharines who handle homelessness, and they work with homeless people, they're of the opinion that the homelessness often gets causes the people to either get worse or to start becoming mentally ill or into substance abuse.
Well, yeah, and we can get onto that in a minute, and
Yeah.
One of the things I wanted to say before we get on to that is that I believe, and I don't know about you, but I
I know
believe,
I'd be that way if I ended up on the streets. I'd go
yeah,
pretty crazy.
yeah, I know. And one of the things that I believe is that, you see, homelessness is felt, the brunt of it is felt right at the city level, right at, it
Hmm.
starts outside your front door on your street. Now, you might
Yeah,
not see the homeless person there, but hey, it's Friday morning, it's garbage day. There's a possibility I might see the homeless guy there sifting through the places to see if there's any beer cans he can take back to the to the what do you call it, to the beer store, all right, to raise himself a few pennies, all right.
yeah,
Every
we do
little
that
help.
too. We
Yeah,
do that too. We leave things out for
but
people.
I think for us to assume that it must be the municipalities that take care of it, I think is wrong, because there
No,
needs to be the solution needs to come from all three levels. It needs to come from municipalities discussing issues with provincial governments, with federal solutions helping in there, and essentially the need needs to be probably driven by your local municipality that gets in touch with the federal and the provincial levels that says,
exactly.
hey, what are we going to do about homelessness in my city?
Exactly. Because what happens here is what everybody thinks, oh, well, oh, the municipal, like during the last municipal election, like I ran in the last municipal election here in St. Catharines, and you talked with Lori Lococo on Wednesday when you talked about when you ran. Okay, we
Yeah,
both ran at the same municipal election, except you in Niagara Falls and me here in St. Catharines. Hey, so I ran in my own ward right here. In my own ward, surprisingly or not, although we're outside of the downtown, we do experience homelessness in our own ward, where I've had reports from people telling me that, um, yeah, yeah, this is where like we're hearing reports of people coming down and sleeping on people's porches, stealing from people's porches, and there's a report of a couple walking around with a little red wagon filled with stuff that is still from porches. And
yeah,
they're like, it is crazy that this is where people have been talking about this, and then they are all in tent cities out in the out by the 12 Mile Creek, where we go back, and this is just across the way from where I live.
yeah. Well, the other question there, of course, is that I got no problem with the guy who's picking up the cans. I do have problems with the people who come on porches. I think that's out of order because porches are private property. And that was an
Absolutely.
interesting story I heard this morning on the radio before I came down. Um,
Hmm.
in Slovenia, they've come up with this new idea that you've got a porch paint pot camera and spray and basically paintball thrower, right?
That's a good thing.
It's a newly adapted thing. So basically, if you can recognize, you can put up and recognize everybody, so your friends, your family, your next door neighbor, etc., etc. So you put them onto the facial recognition um, system, and if they don't have a facial recognition system, your cell phone will beep, and you have the option to fire a paintball at the person.
Well, you
you
better
know,
watch. Could be a process server. Could be.
well, yeah, and that puts a whole new concept on the job of process serving, doesn't it?
Yeah. Should talk to Jordan
Yeah,
about that one.
yeah. Okay, so one here interesting thing is there's a lady who spoke in this is going back a while, since 2016, but I guess the issue is still a live one. Kerry Aldrich basically was at Bernie Sanders rally in Iowa, and she described through tears what it was like struggling with less than $12,000 a year, and she survived on 8,000 for each of the last 2 years. Right? She said she was born in a middle class family but has hovered near poverty all her adult life. Now she attended a pay-as-you-go college for many years. Basically, that's an interesting concept. We were talking about part-time education the other day, and that must be part and parcel of that. And she went to this pay-as-you-go college for a couple of years while working, then left because she couldn't afford to continue her studies. And at the same time, her moderate savings essentially were destroyed by a healthcare issue that she had, which insurance wouldn't cover. And that's a typical problem. That is a big problem that exists in the United States. And basically, she's been 3 times in the last 4 years. That would have been between 2012 and 2016. She's lived in her 36-year-old car that's got more than 400,000 miles on it. I have never owned a 36-year-old car, but the last car I had to change it because it was like 12 years old and dying.
Mm-hmm. That was almost found on road dead, wasn't it? Or found in your driveway dead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, it was a FOD.
Yeah, a FOD.
Yeah. But you see, here's the thing. That actually, how many times have you heard a story like that?
Yes,
Right?
there are people who live in their cars here in Niagara region.
Yeah, absolutely. And one other thing that is saying is 60 to 75% of unhoused people have a mental health condition, according to the University of Calgary.
Yeah.
All right. So this was a report in Global News that was actually this is an up-to-date report. So this is this week to April 18th, 2024. So that's yesterday. And they're saying a new study published by a team of researchers at the University of Calgary has found the majority of people who experience homelessness have an underlying mental health condition. And I believe that the mental health condition is, it's always been my belief the mental health condition is brought on because of the conditions that bring on homelessness.
Yeah, like that's what I said.
Mental
It
health
talks there
condition,
about the cyclical issues with poverty,
Me-
homelessness, and some trauma, right, for some.
Yeah, I was going to say what I said about it's brought on by the conditions that bring about homelessness. Those conditions that bring about homelessness do not start necessarily at the point when the person is made homeless, right? There are times when, for example, eviction from your rental property because of non-payment of rent or something may bring on homelessness at an instance not at your control. But when I was talking about the conditions that bring on homelessness, for example, loss of a job, being tail-ended out of the NEI program, that type of thing, where you end up homeless, you could be experiencing the mental health crisis for many months in advance of actually becoming homeless.
Yeah,
It's the poverty, it's the conditions that lead to homelessness that actually bring about that mental health condition, whether it's before or after becoming homeless.
Yeah, exactly. Because there's too much, like there's been a lot of research done in the United States. Like United States has some differences because of their healthcare system. Where some people don't have health insurance because health insurance tends to be tied around where people. And there's Chris says a majority of all people nowadays have an underlying mental health issue. I said, yeah, true. I think people are going crazy.
Well, there's a certain amount. There's a certain amount of truth in what
Yeah.
Chris is saying there, because in fact, actually, you know, that how do we get these people who basically, you know, we get some crazies out there, and many of them are perfect, you know, not living in poverty, right? And Mike also says in that, in relation to that, anxiety and worry from poverty is a major factor of mental illness. Absolutely, Mike. You know, that's exactly what I was alluring to. If you feel, you know, let's say that you work for an employer that has a record of terminating 3/4 of its staff in October, because that's the end of the work season. And around here, that's a familiar story, because we know that story, because that is what happens every year to many tourism workers. You know, they do that. I can imagine that in a situation whereby you're getting to the end of summer, when Family Day comes along at the end of summer, that's the point at which the anxiety level goes. You know, you've been probably satisfied from here, but now the anxiety level goes up. Because even if last year you weren't one of those that were laid off at the end of October, there's a possibility that this year you will be.
Yeah, there's ups and downs of tourism season too. I mean, you have good seasons and you have bad seasons, and there are some things that can be done year round, a lot of things that cannot. So that's very difficult, especially worrying. Like, I like the way Mike Cushman expressed about worrying about as a result of poverty.
Yeah,
can lead into that.
Yeah, and exactly that. You know, for example, I used to use the example of one of the problems about tourism is such a fickle industry that, for example, if you and I worked in competing factories, we lived in, we were neighbors in the same street. You and I lived in competing factories in the same area, and your factory just closed down and made you and fired everybody, everybody there, and my factory didn't. I'd be like, well, no, I'm not going on holiday this year. I'm canceling my holiday plans because I don't know whether I'm going to be fired, as soon as I go on holiday. Right. So that's how tourism is fickle, because I cancel my plans because I don't feel good about it. Right.
Yes, exactly.
Right?
Now,
And
Chris tells us job, J-O-B, just over broke.
yeah. And I think that's how many of us feel right now. We're just over broke. Right. And going back to that, our main problem is poverty. Right. And the question I think that we have is, how the hell do we do something about it?
Yeah, and this is a very intertwined problem, and this is where a lot of times people get it wrong. One of the things that the main issue is housing.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say
why aren't we focusing on getting people housing? During the 90s, I heard about homelessness all the time in the U.S. and to some extent in Toronto, big cities like Toronto and Vancouver, that sort of thing. I heard about it all the time, about it happening. Then everybody kept going about, of course, how we talk about a lot of them end up with mental health situations and addictions nowadays. We're seeing a lot of that. We keep hearing about that. They say, well, we got to get them clean and get them off the needle and get them mentally well first, and then we can get them into housing.
No.
But how are we going to do this while they're living on the street?
Yeah. I think the answer is that solution is the wrong way round.
Yeah.
And it was interesting.
We have Blair Higgs. We have Blair Higgs up in New Brunswick, Premier. He was trying to pass a Compassionate Care Act.
Well, we'll get to that in a minute. We'll get to that in a minute, because I want to get to that in due course. Now, it occurs to me that in January this year, there was there was a place in St. Catharines where they were going to build about 50 homeless homes, small homes for homeless people. So a bed, a bed, a lounge, somewhere to eat, somewhere to cook food, all in one bundle. But these were basically container homes built this way. They were put up rapidly, they were put up quickly, they were they're monitored and everything like this. And I have to say, they opened in February, and I have to say that since then, in the downtown core of St. Catharines, I've noticed a distinct reduction in the number of homeless.
Absolutely, me too. It's because there were people who are propping up tents on James Street,
Yeah.
and a couple of them behind where the old courthouse is.
Well, are you going to say that's almost like putting up the tent on City Hall lawn, right?
Yeah, that's what they should do. I mean, if people are that upset, they should just put them all up City Hall lawn, or more correctly, here at Niagara Region headquarters.
Yeah. Well, that's another and main problem. Well, Chris has this viewpoint about the main problem is not poverty. The main problem is we aren't willing to live together. Yes and no. I'm not willing to have somebody who's not part of my family live with me permanently.
Me neither. Me neither.
Right. I would much, but I do take the point of what Chris is saying, is that as families, we should maybe stay together. He believes in that we should actually have multi-generational homes. And I know that we've talked about that one before.
Yeah, that's
right?
it actually. Yeah.
And there's another aspect. He was saying it's actually called unsheltered now. Home is where the heart is. Yeah. Okay. When the last crash happened, according to Mike, Canada did not correct the overpriced real estate. They created shadow banking, which caters for the rich. Yeah, and that's another problem, right? Okay, so saying homeless is dehumanizing, like they aren't individuals. That's why we talk about people suffering from homelessness.
Yes,
And
exactly.
homelessness is a the aim is that homelessness is a temporary state.
Yeah, it's a
Right.
state of
And
being as opposed to a person's character. Like, we
yeah,
got to stop saying the homeless.
yeah, yeah,
Okay. Yeah.
yeah. Okay, one of the questions we talked about the other day was, okay, one of the challenges you have as a homeless person is I want to do this job. I'm perfectly good at doing this job because I've done it. I've got a 50-year track record in doing this, right? This job was built for me, right? Main problem is you don't have an address. You can't whip out your driving license that has your last known address on it because you no longer live there. Right. So how do you provide an address to that employer that you're the ideal person for?
Exactly. This is one of the things.
Well,
No
you had
address, no home, no
you had
welfare.
yeah you had a solution for that, didn't you? You were talking about that. For there's an organization that started to do something about that.
Yep, there was an organization that actually would allow people to use the address, okay, where they were located. People would get their mail at that address, and mail would be sorted for them. They can come in and then pick up their mail. It's sort of like a what we have nowadays, like a UPS store, but it's not set up as a UPS store. They can get other services there too,
Yeah.
and people can go there, and then they also provide some people with shelter, and then some people with meals, but they also have other programs or counseling and services to help
Is
them
this
get
a
these
local?
jobs.
Is this a local one?
This is something that I've heard of being done in Toronto.
Okay, so
I'm sure that somebody local is doing it, but I'm not
yeah.
familiar with it. If somebody local is doing it, they can certainly get a hold of us and tell us this, because
Yeah.
I think that it's very important that people know that there is somebody out there that's trying to help solve these sorts of problems. I do know that the Start Me Up Niagara was setting up a number of services. Like you have to hand it to Susan Vendetti when she helped found the Start Me Up Niagara. She was its executive director for a long time. I've done a lot of work with Start Me Up Niagara with helping set up their programs or structure legally and helping them set up some of their programs and giving some training to some of the people in the programs. But Start Me Up Niagara has they range from anybody who's just had mental health issues and who just wants to start their own business, or to somebody who is absolutely homeless and who needs help with housing, to people having trouble accessing, say, healthcare or other types of things. And then they work with other agencies who will help you get ID. Homeless people don't carry their ID very long.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they have to have somebody
Well,
help them to get that birth
that
certificate, to get all
yeah,
of
that
that stuff.
getting ID is an important thing, because whether or not you drive, many people have driving licenses as their ID, and that driving license and that ability to pass it over. Hey, yes, I've got I've got a home. Here's my address on your ID.
Mm-hmm.
Is something that could help you get a job. Is something that could, uh, we'll be realistic. We know that in the week you get that job, and even in the first months of you getting that job, you're not going to be necessarily out of homelessness, but you might then therefore be able to build up the resources enabled to get you to call out of homelessness.
Absolutely, and there needs to be some way of helping people build up. Like they used to have something called rent banks. I don't know if they still have that at the municipal level.
There is in Toronto a rent bank. One of
Yeah,
our clients, one of our tenant clients in Toronto, actually borrowed money from the rent bank.
yeah, which is a good way to do things to keep yourself from being homeless, and particularly when your landlord's about to evict you because you're in arrears, and you actually do get to the landlord and tenant board and ready to get an order to evict. So like now we're talking before about how it takes months and months and months to get there, but you're at that stage. But the tenant needs to be able to build up some money to either save their tenancy or to obtain another tenancy.
Yeah.
So this is
But
very
typically,
serious.
yeah, typically the rent bank that I've heard of in being used in Toronto typically is for the first and last,
Yeah,
where people have been evicted from an old their old location for whatever reason,
yeah,
and not all of those are necessarily because of non-payment of rent. They're not necessarily
yeah,
at fault evictions,
yeah,
but they may well be evictions that have come about because of the situation that individual has faced.
yeah. This is the same here where I've had been very active and proactive in getting people into housing, where I've had a couple of clients who are ready to be evicted because they either they're in arrears or they have reached a subsidy agreement, or there's various reasons why people could get evicted here in Niagara. But I've managed to work with people who've managed to cobble money together and to establish a payment plan for these people.
Yeah.
They're still living at their current place. They're still living in their apartments
Even though they've
because,
got
yeah,
massive arrears because they're
yeah,
managing to pay it off.
yeah, we're
Yeah,
renting to pay off because what we
yeah,
had is they were paying say $500 to $600 a month rent, because that was their income. But what we did is we established it where we would get a subsidy for them through the Canada Ontario Housing Benefit or through the regional subsidy program, and we would top that up, and then we'd also have a repayment arrangement on top of that, where they'd pay a couple of $100 extra a month on top so that they like sometime in the middle of the month they can get it, or sometime like that's different than the first of the month. So they
yeah.
were able to cobble that together during the month. So we did this, and this is something that we've been able to do. It's sometimes, but you have to have the cooperation of the landlord. Sometimes the landlords are very uncooperative or unwilling to keep them because they are tired of people ripping off, and I couldn't blame them. You know, some people are well behind in rent for months, and yeah, and that's the thing when you do this.
And Mike, sorry, Chris is right that students, old people, new immigrants have learned to pull resources to get ahead, but it doesn't work for everybody.
No, it
Right?
doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
I've lived together in rooming houses and stuff like that, and I've had food stolen from my fridge. I've had my room broken into. I've had one guy try to sexually assault me. No, 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 thank you.
Yeah.
I
So
like living alone.
he's saying greedy adults that want to live alone are the market home builders to cater the market home builders cater to. And to some extent that is correct.
Yeah, like the
And
single family homes, they certainly
and
do.
and he's repeating that by saying it's a me culture that we live in. And
Yeah,
to some extent that is true.
yeah, to some extent. I mean, like Peter, like if you're going to go in and build a nice condo, you know, and this is a really nice condo, and of course the person would prefer to live alone, and then they meet someone, and then they combine that, you know. I would rather have that
Well,
just if it's somebody that I have, like in my family or a
yeah, well,
spouse or stuff.
you see, when I was in my 20s, one place I remember living in, we rented this place in Edgware in North London, and it was myself, right? It was a lady that I worked with, her sister, and one of her sister's colleagues that rented that house, right?
Hmm.
So they were interconnected that way, and essentially that was a way that we did rent houses with a community back in the day. But it's not something I would, you know, I would recommend today. And okay, so
Yeah.
Alicia Mary asked the question: is your home open to homeless people?
No, I think I,
And I think she's asking the question probably to Chris. I don't know.
yeah, maybe Chris could open up his home to homeless people. I don't know what his situation is there. Maybe he has
Yeah.
family and
Well,
others.
he's from, Chris has been on the show on several
Yeah,
occasions anyway, and is
Chippewa,
always,
Chippewa. Yeah,
yeah,
Chippewa
Mr.
guy.
Chippewa.
Yeah,
And I know that he comes from and is part of a large family, which is why he espouses the viewpoint of you need to think more than just the single family unit that we
yeah,
often think about.
yeah.
And and
And I
hey,
think that if you have a large family and that sort of thing, and then you could pool resources that way, why not? You know,
well,
like
and
some people like myself, I don't have a lot of family.
yeah,
Hey, but there are people in the area who do have families. So there's
well, I
different
was going to
ways
say.
that can work.
Yeah, and I was going to say that if, for example, you live in, let's say, like an Indian family, many Indians live in multi-generational homes.
Oh,
Those
yes, they do.
those grandma or grandpa, those
Mhm.
parents, and there's the children of the parents, and some of those children have gotten married and have children of their own now. So
Mhm.
the children pool in those households can be quite large.
Yep, and large Italian families I know in the Falls have been able to do
Yeah,
that
and
too.
Italian families have a similar approach as well,
Yep, I know
right?
because I've
And
had representation. I've represented a number of people in one particular Italian family in some of their branches, which I've represented from, and they have a wonderful way of looking after each other, which
well, I
is
was going to
amazing.
say, if you're going to do this, what you need is actually a different style of family home. I thought about this some time ago because I was thinking, well, I'd love to be able to have this whereby I have, I have a home that includes me, and I have a home that my son can live in, and I have a home that his children could live in, etc., etc. So we start with one house on the lot. We then make the second house on the lot. We then make the third house on the lot, etc., etc. So
Yeah.
you have 5 or 6 houses with common shared utilities. So you, for example, all of those homes butt into a dome, a nice glass dome that is your living room, that is your
Yeah.
common living area. So
Mhm.
people can, and that common living area has a TV space in it. It has a pool space in it for those who want to play pool. It has a game, a TV games section of it that people, for those that want to do that. And
Yeah.
for those that want to listen to music, another section. And each of those areas may be shielded sound wise, but you could walk from area to area, and members of the family could all gather together in that area. That's one of the things
Yeah.
that I thought of. So you build yourself a multi-generational family, and in that regard, there is some issues about, if then a person becomes jobless, it doesn't matter. They don't become homeless.
Yeah. Because people are pooling
Yeah,
together the resources and then they work
yeah,
on
and
different
and
things.
and exactly that. You'd have different style of family home, different schedules, different eating times, different sleeping rooms. And in fact, actually there, because you've got a family home, Joe might work nights, so he can sleep in Mary's bed because she works days,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And they can co-share things like that.
At one time, I think it was about 15 years ago, I was thinking of a time when I was going to look at getting the in-laws into one suite, us in another,
Well,
and our kids as they grew older with their partners. Okay, so I was
yeah,
thinking of that, and we were going to go and do that. So something
you
like
were
that, I
thinking
would be open to.
maybe buy a triplex or something like that.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And that would work because in that way, each of us would all have housing and we'd also be able to see each other and be able to eat
And you all
together.
share the garden.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
there's another interesting thing that I was told about, and I know this person within that community. This is as soon as it comes to mind, this is the Ismaili community and I understand this happens across the world in Ismaili communities, but the one I know about is the Ismaili community that happens in Mombasa in Kenya. And that Ismaili community, the concept behind it is that everybody pays their share. If you're rich, you can have your nice big house within the Ismaili community, but the other aspect to that is that poor people are also included in that community. And if you don't have a job right now, your everything is taken care of. Your rent is taken care of. Your needs are taken care of. Your kids go to school. And the interesting thing is about this, that the kids from that community all go to the Aga Khan school in Mombasa, and that's one of the best schools in that area. And it doesn't matter whether you're rich or poor, you all go to the Aga Khan school,
Hmm.
right? So that's an interesting concept, that some communities have, and I believe that the Ismaili community also do that here in part where they have community properties here in Canada,
Yeah. And
right?
very much this is where some people are Britain because particularly what was amazing, because this is some of the work that I was doing in the 1990s and early 2000s, was for mental health. I used to work in the mental health system. There was a lot of research done during that time about recovery from schizophrenia. And people who lived in these types of communities that you're talking about actually had a very high recovery rate from schizophrenia. And in these communities, they don't have a lot of medication.
Yeah,
They just
and
recover.
yeah, I was going to say because in fact, actually, those communities like that are supportive communities. The
Yeah,
other thing that I know is that hey, this is worthwhile knowing if you happen to be homeless. Did you know that pretty well every Sikh temple in the world offers food to travelers or homeless people, free food? You don't have to pay, you don't have to make a donation or anything, but every Sikh temple in the world is supposed to do that. It's part of their reason for existing. And
Part of their faith.
yes, the food will be Indian food. So if you're not keen on curry and rice, maybe it's not for you. But the point being is that they have that belief that you feed the needy. And they don't even, and here's the interesting thing about this is that they ask no questions. There are no questions asked. You need something, a meal, come sit. Right. Another one that I came across was actually Buddhist. The Buddhist monasteries also have a similar thing that you can come, you can be fed, but you have to listen to a lecture. It doesn't mean to say you need to believe in Buddhism or, they don't expect to convert any one of you, right? But they will give a lecture on a particular topic before you eat, right? Not a long one. We'll give you like a 15-minute lecture on the thing, and it's like you've got to be in the monastery, in the hall with your shoes off and sat down by 12 o'clock. Otherwise, you're not getting in. Right? Wait till tomorrow. Right?
Yeah,
but
like this is where we had a lot of people talk when we were talking about the system with food banks and that. Hey, food banks growth has become exponential. It's almost to the point that more people are taking from the food bank than giving to it.
Well, right? in fact, actually, one of the things is that made the decision a while back that while we, every time if we do have some money, to take something to the food bank and donate to the food bank. And typically the sort of things that food banks want is rice. They need tons and tons of rice. They get through bags of it a day. They need things like kidney beans. They need tomatoes. They need other canned vegetables, because that basically is where they get how they make a lot of their food. Soups that are vegetable and rice, for example, is a mainstay there. And the reason for it is rice is very nutritional, rice and vegetables are nutritional. They treat everybody in that regard. And one of the days that I dropped off this donation, there was actually a BMW outside. Now, I don't know whether that was a BMW from a
worker,
a worker, a volunteer would be the correct term.
Yeah,
volunteer. A volunteer or somebody who was donating their time, or maybe even just a visitor to the church. But there was a BMW outside there, right? And what part of their policy is you need it, you can get it, right? So it doesn't matter what you arrive in, you can get that that food.
Yeah, exactly. Like there's a lot of that kind of thing, because I know Start Me Up Niagara had they used to have the lunch program. Anybody can go to the lunch program. All they cared about was your name. They didn't make you go through where do you get your income from? Can I get your tax returns? Can I get your ID? They didn't care about that. They just asked people to go, and I think that's the best approach.
Okay, there's a couple of international things that I want to bring into the picture here. One, because we know homelessness is an international problem, and it's
every single country in the world has homelessness exploding in the last pandemic.
Since the pandemic. Okay, Helsinki has, for about the last 10 to 15 years, I say Helsinki, I mean Finland has a program called Housing First. Basically, it's guaranteed it's guaranteed within their constitution that basically, and I'm not saying that you're going to get a good place, but everybody has a home. It's a constitutional guarantee. So, for example, you face a divorce, you're not going to be homeless. the day you kicked out of your house, right? So yeah, you can recover your situation, and they, alongside the Housing First program, there are actually a number of programs that they put into place for recovery if you need it. Drugs, drink, other recovery problems if you need it, right? But there's not, that nobody is tied to the concept that we seem to be in this country, is that every homeless person is also an addict.
Yes, and this is too much of an assumption and a stereotype. I think a lot of us get that because we're not an addict, but the homeless people must be, so therefore we're not going to become homeless.
Yeah.
People don't realize one lost job, one lost spouse, one accident, one illness could put you on the streets too.
We're just like it, just there. Yeah, exactly. Another interesting thing that I'm intrigued by, in 1923, yeah. Before World War, actually it's earlier than that. Before World War I, a terrible state of social disarray. The housing situation in Vienna was deplorable, and working class residents and families often had to double or triple up in order to rent. They basically rent their beds out to other people coming in. So the night shift, you could rent your beds out to the night shift in order that they could sleep. That type of thing. That's how people were getting by. And in 1919, there was a newly elected social democratic government. They began planning for a more livable and equitable city. They rooted those plans in a commitment to provide quality housing and well-resourced communities for all. In order to start this vision, they basically ran a pilot project, which could easily have been sidelined at the next election in 1922, but essentially went on to build just over 1,000 of such units. And those units, the irony here is this is a social democrat program that was taken on in Germany by the Nazis, believe it or not, because they didn't like homelessness either.
Yeah, it's very interesting when you take a good look at some of the Nazis. Why did these people get elected? Think about it.
Because they took consideration, okay, they pointed the finger at Jews, that's for sure, but they took consideration for the poor that existed in Germany. They were wrong in blaming
poor Aryans, your poor Aryan race.
But they took measures to actually resolve the homelessness within the Aryan race. They hated. It's true that they hated the Jews. They blamed the Jews on for every wrong in society, but they took steps to resolve the issue. It's like Germany was like, Adolf Hitler actually appreciated took on board Ford's idea. Ford wanted to build a car for every American. So for everybody who in America, he wanted them to have an automobile. And basically Hitler the same. That's the reason why we have the Volkswagen today.
The Volkswagen. Yeah, that comes up to the name people.
Yeah. And that's a people's wagon. And I believe the term was people's housing in Germany. And that was the original term, because that was the original term in Vienna. And of course, Vienna is a German-speaking city, right? German-speaking area. And that's an interesting question. And here's the issue, is that within 5 years of doing that plan, they had 65,000 municipally owned units, right? 65,000. They started with 1,000 units. Right. And the whole point about that is, of course, the building would have created in a time when, we're talking about in the 1920s, where 1919, 1920s, where much poverty existed. It was deplorable social conditions. And as we know, 1929, 1930 also became the Great Depression. But before the Great Depression, there was a lot of social problems that existed in a lot of Europe. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Europe didn't really suffer the Great Depression the way that the Americas did, but they had they had a lot of poverty between the two world wars, right?
Yeah,
And
definitely. This was
yeah,
something where if you look at the differentiation between the Americas and like especially North America and the European states, they had a very different attitude about how to do things. In America was like, hey, we're the leader of the free world. Hey,
well,
so
no,
it's
yeah,
all
but
free
you see,
market,
also
particularly
in
after
America,
the World War with Milton Friedman and his idea of how
well,
capitalism should be set.
yeah, and a lot of that during at the end of World War One, America was in a particularly buoyant state, whereas much of Europe was in a very depressed state. And
Hmm.
that depression actually brought about in Germany, for example, that those battles between the old Weimar Republic, the new Nazi Party, the new Communist Party, the new Socialist Party, each of those with different ideas. And it happened, the Weimar Republic waned in its ideology, leaving those other three parties, Nazis, socialists, and communists, to vie for the leadership position in the parliament.
Yeah, but it's interesting when you look at these countries and you go to them today, like Vienna, and you're talking about Finland, different places like that. You don't see very much homelessness today.
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing is, I've been to Vienna. I've been to Vienna. I don't remember any homelessness at all. But then again, um, you know, I was going there as a tourist. Why would I remember that?
Well, the Niagara Falls people are going out, they're seeing all the tourists and
I
they're seeing all
drove.
the
Yeah, well,
homeless.
that's true. That's true. Well, you see, I drove from Munich, where I was working, to Vienna one weekend for, just because it's drivable. Right?
Mhm,
Everybody said, go to Vienna. So we went to Vienna.
mhm, yeah.
Interesting place. Very, absolutely. It has got some of the nicest, properties in the world. The old aristocratic homes that exist in Vienna, absolutely to die for. The lawns of some of these homes, unbelievably good, right?
Mhm.
A national treasure that Austria can be proud of, right? It's put no bones about it. It's a national treasure. It's now owned by the people, and so it should be, right? It's something that Austria can be proud of, and they can also be proud of having done this, because, in fact, this initiative still exists today in Austria.
Yeah, exactly. Because one of the articles we pulled up, it talked about a person who was visiting them, and then they said that they don't see any homeless.
Yeah, yeah,
And this is interesting because here we are in Canada. Everybody talks about us being a really great country in the world that we provide for everybody. Maybe we don't. And I think we need to consider what our circumstances are and what we need to do. And Canada can take a leadership and maybe take a page out of the book from Vienna or Helsinki and see what we can do.
yeah, and that actually is an important point. I think, and I put this point up here at the last, Canada needs to be a leader, not lagging behind in this.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
And hey, one small step at a time, and maybe, and I've been saying this. I've been talking about this for a number of people since that last election, because in talking to people out on the streets, I didn't go into it thinking that we needed any form of social housing, but I came out of it thinking that we actually need we need to start building we need to start building municipal or cooperative housing, affordable
Mhm.
municipal and cooperative housing, not not housing that is done on the basis of okay, well, part of it is about resolving the homeless problem, but on the basis of getting getting affordable living solutions.
Yep,
And it's not there will always be private there will always be private private rentals, um but there needs to be like public rentals alongside it, which helps to firstly resolve some of the homeless issues,
yep,
right? Secondly, needs to resolve some of the fact that people can't afford homes, and needs to actually offer homes at affordable prices, right? That whole
mhm,
question of what affordable is another question entirely, which
yep,
I'm not going to
exactly.
answer at this point. But then we also then need to be able to build, ensure that people are secure in those properties, right? So give
Yep,
some form of security of tenure, and build into that what happens if people are homeless. We've got area things in Niagara where we've got some places, there's some units, there's some places out on McLeod Road which are owned by a Niagara Falls housing charity, that where people are supplied by Niagara Regional Housing. I'm not talking about interrupting that process. I'm talking about if we build municipal homes, we add, that normal people can actually go and get a municipal home if they choose to do so,
absolutely.
right?
Yeah, absolutely. Like there's a differentiation to me to what we call attainable housing and what's called rent geared to income housing.
Yeah, we're
I
not
always
talking
think
about.
that, yeah, and I also think that when you have rent geared to income housing, you should not be putting them all together in one building because that creates a lot of problems because
And
sometimes people
which you
have
have in
the,
some
yeah,
parts, yeah.
yeah, in some places, like there's, like in my own neighborhood, it's amazing because, like within a 10-minute walk, I have three public housing units that are owned by the Niagara region. And then on the other end of it, I can go the other way and walk another way, and you have all the big mansions.
Yeah,
so,
right.
so I think that you really have to get rid of these extremes
Yeah,
and
you have to
start
get rid of
having
the
it
extremes. Well,
where
in
I
fact,
could live in a nice co-op housing, for example, that's well kept, well programmed, where I could be living next door to somebody who makes $150,000 a year, and I could be somebody who might be in an old age security pension. So these are different things where you need to have that type of community and built in, where each member of that community can participate in the upkeep and maintenance
yeah,
of that
and, and
community.
an affordable living that doesn't throw you out because you suddenly get a new job and a $10,000 pay rise.
Yep, exactly. Or throw you out because one of your kids left home,
Yeah, yeah,
which
exactly.
happens in
All
too
right.
much
And
RGI situations.
we are going to have to leave it there because I have to take my car to the dealership to get a fix done on it.
Yep, he's got to
Where
take his car to the doctor.
got to be, yeah. Well, no, this is actually, I got one of those notices of of recall.
Recall.
Yeah.
Yep.
So they've calendared me for this time, so I've got to get going now. All right.
Okay.
All right. So
Yep, you
thank you,
better get your
everybody.
Jeep into the checkup.
So thank you, everybody. And hey, Mike, Chris, and others, even if we don't agree with your comments, hey, we damn well appreciate them.
Absolutely. We appreciate all the comments that come in. Like there was another day we were on there, and Randy West was making a lot of different comments, and another day Mike Cushman made a lot of comments.
Yeah.
And this is something we appreciate because we would like to get people and share this on your Facebook community so that people can come on and also listen to the show and give their feedback.
Yep, and we've had today, and don't know for how long, we've had your personality shows a new listener on YouTube. There you go. There you go.
Yep,
We're
absolutely.
building listeners all the time. And just for everybody to know, Dave is back Monday, I believe. I believe. I
Oh,
believe.
we can get his humor back on the road. He's
Yeah.
funny. I like him.
All right. Well, let's. So we'll leave it there, and thank you, Angela, for being with us the last week and a half, and thank everybody for staying loyal. All right.
Yeah, it was my pleasure. My pleasure, Peter. And anytime you need me, I'm here.
Thank